If I told you that there's a huge shift of power happening around the entire world, the country that has been at the top is quickly getting replaced, would you believe me? Because it is true. And the scariest part is there's really nothing we can do about it without causing World War III. Welcome back, my friends. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you stack silver and you want your daily news to be uncensored, you've come to the right place. So make sure to subscribe and definitely click the bell. If you go to usdebtclock.org, which shows a live counter of the United States debt, which is $34,144,051,940,000, there's a secret window that automatically pops up. There's two different $100 bills, the old money on the left and then the new money on the right. Old money, currency $100, deflating, wealth transfer to the 1%. Also, the new money, which is asset-based wealth creation, is a debt-free currency, and it shows it's backed by gold and silver and oil, corn, housing, and that's really what needs to happen, because you see this circle right here, international money exchangers, and then under it, it says 100 IOUs. That's what the world's reserve currency is. Do you see how this may be extremely problematic, especially since COVID exposed how truly broke the United States really is? I mean, these countries having faith in a collapsing dollar would be, especially with America's greedy little fingers in their pockets. Why won't they just say, hold up, why? Let's create our own currency and back it by something. The new money, digital currency backed by physical commodities. Why digital? Because we are in a digital era. Now, that reverts to this question that is brought up right in front of our faces. Will BRICS expansion finally end Western economic and geopolitical dominance? Hey everyone, it's Slayer from the future. I just recorded this entire video. This article is brilliant, but I needed to share this with you before we jumped into it because it brought up a lot of points on a broader perspective and showed how a power shift of this nature is not going to be as seamless as we may think. Check out the summary of this entire article. The expanded BRICS are economically stronger, yet geopolitically weaker, and while they may rebalance the global order, any thoughts of replacing it are misguided. The eclectic mix of different political, economic, and cultural systems, including democracies, autocratic monarchies, authoritarian regimes, and an Islamic theocracy, lay bare the difficulties associated with reaching a common ground on any new system of global governance. By contrast, the Western-dominated system they seek to counteract, while not perfect, is far more homogeneous, founded on a well-established rule-based order, and without the scale of geopolitical tensions that engulf the newly expanded BRICS. So there you have it. I wanted to share the summary before the video because this video is over 20 minutes long, and I'm sure a lot of you won't even know that this article came from that perspective, showing both sides of the coin, pun intended. We are experiencing some countries that are playing chess while we are playing checkers in the middle of our own civil war, where there's a much larger war happening at play, especially when you see the results of what just happened in one of their meetings and who's joining the BRICS, which stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, the 5 originating countries. So I'm going to share this article. You need to really think about how the severity of this. This isn't stuff that just blows over. We're talking about a global power shift happening. That doesn't blow over. The only thing that's going to blow over is the normalcy of our day-to-day lives. That's going to blow over. So you need to be prepared. And when I say that, I mean prepared, whether it is financially, which would be precious metals in my humble opinion, whether it's food or water or shelter. I'm not saying you got to be living in a doomsday bunker and the apocalypse is here, but I'm saying this all is real information. This isn't a hoax or conspiracy or myth. This is really happening. It's just the American media is heavily censored and directed towards ourselves, so we really don't know this is happening unless you specifically come across it, or luckily come across it, or have just than someone who's been maybe stacking or in the investing world, but only 1% of the world owns precious metals. And I'm sure a lot of people, the majority, I could confidently say, have no idea any of this is happening, don't even know what the BRICS is. If you ask them, do you know about the BRICS nations? They'll say, is that a country that all their houses are made in brick or something? What? But all in seriousness, I wanted to just talk about that because some people may think I'm exaggerating the severity of this, but I'm probably undermining it, to be honest. Following the conclusion of the 2023 BRICS meetings held in Johannesburg, South Africa, the official summit declaration announced that in January 2024, the BRICS group of emerging market economies would undertake in the world of Chinese President an historic expansion and admit 5 new members, which is Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. Argentina was also invited, but its new president, Javier, declined the offer. That's very interesting. Argentina declined. So while the term BRIC originally came to fruition with the work of Jim O'Neill in 2001, BRIC is Brazil, Russia, India, and China. It was also, those were the members. But then the following year, 2009, or 2009 followed by 2010, South Africa joined. So that was the S on BRICS nations: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. Even though there are others now and many more signing up, most of the world is going to be affected and influenced by this, especially when you also incorporate the Belt Road Initiative on top of this. So, as a group of high growth emerging economies, even before its recent expansion, the group accounted for 26% of the global GDP and 40.8% of the global population. And by the way, mind you, all of these countries are buying records amounts of gold and silver. Brazil, Russia did, India did as well, and China, which is the biggest consumer. And now I could show you a video of them producing as well. So it's insane. It's like the answer is right in front of us. And once you realize afterwards, looking back, you'll say this was so obvious. Why would Brazil and Russia and India and China be buying record-breaking amounts of gold to the years leading up right before it happened? And silver, India bought a ridiculously large amount of silver last year. And then this year, we set records for the most amount of gold bought by other world central banks. It's right. This is obvious, but for some reason, people don't want to admit or acknowledge the truth, probably for their own, for their own sake. Some people cannot comprehend the situation or the severity of it, but regardless, it's happening, and you have to prepare whether you like it or not. You can kick and scream and complain, that's fine, but you still have to do something about it. So, yeah, it's a serious thing, and hopefully you guys watch my podcast with Andy Schechtman, because he really hits the nail on the head about the severity of this. He's probably the most informed about it, and that's why everyone is interviewing him, like Kitco News and Robert Kiyosaki, everywhere you see him. So, however, as important as the BRICS countries are economically by their own admissions, the BRICS grouping is more than an economic forum, in that they commit themselves to the creation of a more representative, fair international order, reinvigorated and reformed multilateral system. Exactly what representative, fair, and reform translates as for the BRICS grouping is unclear, but it is often interpreted to mean that the BRICS will act as a counterweight or indeed a means to ultimately supersede Western dominance economically and politically. It is important therefore to reflect upon the recent expansion of the BRICS groups and implications and likely challenges for future global governance, economics, and geopolitics, given the BRICS grouping is likely to expand its membership further in the years ahead. Man, that is serious, folks. Iran just joined as well. Iran just joined. I mean, think about what's happening. This is a huge power shift. And the main thing I want you to get, not the main thing, but another huge thing that I want you guys to think about beyond this is what we're doing. We're poking the bear. And also, Look at all those countries. What do all those countries have in common? They're all oil rich countries. Do you think they want us to go green and stop using oil? No. That is the worst thing that we could do to affect them because they are rich from oil and now we're trying to go a different route than oil. So you see how this situation is just a huge crap show and it's fully justified of why these countries would be trying to break off and do their own thing. I mean, it makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. And that's the scariest part. It's not like, oh, like this is crazy. Like I get it. I would do the same thing. Um, I love America and, I stand by it. I'm an American citizen, proud. I'm just saying I'm a realist. I understand why. I can't just sit and be like, why are they doing this? Of course, this why is pretty obvious. Um, so it is important there to reflect upon the recent expansions. I wanted to stop there because look at the new countries that just joined after this meeting took place. Where did it show the countries? Right here. So they just brought 5 new members: Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and UAE. Saudi Arabia, folks, the petrodollar. What is this is insane. It's like, and nobody's talking about this. Like Iran and Saudi Arabia just joined the BRICS and nobody really cares or is thinking about the repercussions that could happen from that. That's huge news. That's huge news. So, from an economic perspective, the new membership will generate an additional 2.6 trillion in GDP terms, representing an overall BRICS economy of 28.5 trillion and 28% of global output. Yet, while a significant economic grouping, by comparison, G7 countries continue to dominate global output, accounting for 43.2% of global GDP. G7, what's that, Slayer? G7 are the 7 countries that it's our form of the BRICS. It's our form of the BRICS nations. It's R7. So that's what G7 is. You hear Andy talk about it sometimes, but yeah, even though some countries have left, I forget which ones, but regardless, yeah, that's our form. However, if forecasts are correct, the size and thereof, or therefore importance of G7 economies will reduce over the coming decades. That's scary. While many of the BRICS economies are projected to grow significantly, and see, this is that power shift. This is that huge power shift, especially with the Belt Road Initiative. So this particularly the case in relation to new members such as Egypt and Ethiopia, who are projected to grow by 635% and 1,170% respectively in GDP terms by 2050. Wow. And then imagine who wins this election, how that could, affect things as well. So the projected top economies in the world for GDP, and this is in trillions, in 2050 and 2075. So 2050, we are talking about China, number 1 at 41 trillion, US, number 2, 37, India, number 3, 22, Indonesia, 6.3 trillion. And then you can see in 2075, United States has been kicked down by India. And we're talking about 57 trillion, India 52 trillion. We're talking about $100 trillion. 100 trillion in GDP. Regardless, that's all speculative. Who knows what will be, and by the year 2075, who knows what the world's going to be like. That's a scary thought. But from a trading perspective, the expanded group accounts for more than 43% of global oil production, doubling its capacity and enhancing its geostrategic reach into the Middle East via the admission of Saudi Arabia, Iran, and UAE. Further still, the expanded group now accounts for 25% of global exports, while the original 4 BRIC members accounted for 72% of global reserves of rare earth minerals, with China alone producing 85% of all globally refined earths in 2020, critical for the production of a huge range of products from high-tech weaponry, silver, but also everyday consumables, including electric cars, circuit boards, semiconductors, and mobile phones. Rare earth faces huge demand, part of global supply chain for products consumed by rapidly expanding global middle class, which China, India, Brazil, and Egypt will alone count for 59% of all new middle classes in 2024. Ultimately, the newly enlarged BRICS grouping, which now accounts for 45% of the world's population, will continue to grow in economic and geostrategic importance, shifting the economic center of gravity towards the global south. Wow. That that paragraph is so important on such a large scale that I could read this 10 times and I'm sure there's still the seriousness and the impactfulness of this statement and these percentages is unfathomable, even to someone, of even to the extent of someone like Andy Schectman. I mean, this is I nobody can even try to predict what's going to happen. And that leads me to what Andy said, which is the scariest thing he has ever told me. And he said it on a public podcast in live time. So, you saw my reaction when he said this. He said he can predict the dollar collapsing, or he can predict, precious metals, shooting up, and he can predict all that. But then he says, it leads all up to that, and then it just goes black. He said, I cannot think past that. He says it goes black, and that's where I don't know. What is that black? What does that mean when it goes black? Who knows? But that was a scary thought, just for someone who studied this for so long and researched and has probably the best overall perspective and understanding on this situation, just to admit that, that brick wall he hits, and who knows what that brick wall consists of. That was scary. Like, that really was impactful. And this next part we're going to go into is even scarier. Or not scarier, but this is another very alarming situation. However, the BRICS do not limit their ambitions to an economic agenda, but rather seek to leverage their collective economic weight to pursue a wider political ambition. Believing that the progress of emerging and developing countries are hindered by a Western-centric economic and political order, the BRICS have engaged in a number of actions to rebalance the counteract of existing global order alongside its institutions. Notably, in order to reduce dependence on the World Bank and International Monetary Fund institutions that are historically led by Europeans and Americans and are often criticized for their lack of transparency and draconian structural adjustment programs. The BRICS established the New Development Bank in 2015 to mobilize resources for infrastructure and sustainable development projects. With initial authorized capital of $100 billion, by 2022, the bank has assigned $32.8 billion to 96 approved projects, helping to build and upgrade 15,700 kilometers of roads, 850 bridges, and 260 kilometers of rail transit networks. That's what I'm talking about when I say the Belt Road Initiative. It's connecting by airways, by sea, by train, by land, every possible way, connecting all these countries through trade ports, facilitating growth and development on more favorable terms while simultaneously reducing dependence from Western-led institutions, articulates a clear message about the shifting sands of global power. There you go. That's exactly what I was talking about. From a diplomatic perspective, the hosting of the annual BRICS Summit allows the group to meet and discuss issues they believe are specifically important to emerging market economies. Symbolically, this sends a signal to the West, and particularly the G7 countries, that they no longer exclusively control the global agenda via membership of their exclusive economic and financial forums, which have historically favored their market-based economies and financial systems. Indeed, although a number of BRICS memberships are keen to reform the international monetary system and challenge the dominance of the US dollar, it is less clear how this will be achieved. While the creation of a common BRICS currency would in theory reduce vulnerability to dollar exchange fluctuations, the implementation of a BRICS currency at best many years away given the lack of macroeconomic convergence widely considered to be critical currency or critical to a successful common currency, further rebuffing any prospect of dethroning the dollar according to the Bank for International Settlements. The US dollar remains the single most traded currency, accounting for almost 90% of all foreign exchange transactions. Second, as the world's reserve currency since 1944, and the dollar accounts for 60% of global foreign exchange reserves, whereas by comparison, Chinese accounts for 3%. That doesn't mean much though. Third, the dollar is easily convertible. It's liquid, widely accepted as a medium of exchange, and largely free from capital controls, which the same cannot be said for Chinese, Russia, India, South African currencies. In short, while the BRICS will likely increase their use of local currencies for bilateral trade, in part reducing their exposure to foreign exchange volatility, the demise of the dollar and the introduction of a BRICS common currency is overstated. I don't know about that. I feel like once other countries see this global power shift happening, there'll be more. It will be like a domino effect, a magnet effect, and you'll see more countries wanting to switch sides, right? If you can't beat them, join them. So first, while the collective might think of BRICS economies as beyond question, the group's leverage on international stage is highly reliant to the $17.9 trillion Chinese economy, which accounts for 62.9% of the group's economic output. The dependency is problematic for a number of reasons, not least because it makes China disproportionately powerful within the group itself, but interrelated to this point is bilateral power dynamic between China and India. For example, although India has the second largest BRICS economy, China's economy is 5 times larger in GDP terms. While the BRICS may talk about sovereign equality and mutual respect, ultimately money talks, giving China greater leverage and scope to implement its worldview and interpretation of any recalibrated global governance system. I like that they're looking at this very transparently, saying yes, the BRICS could be doing this, but there's also a lot of complications between the BRICS themselves, and they bring up these roadblocks and these situations that isn't just completely crapping on the Western civilization, saying they still have their own problems. It's not just going rainbows and unicorns, and it will not be a rainbows and unicorns type of transitional oversee of power across the globe. Everything is so messy that for anything to happen very effectively is going to take time, or successfully is going to take time. There's just too much going on for any country to have a plan that's going to work perfectly. There's too many factors. And then you want to incorporate the part about minerals or rare earth metals, or all of the shortages and supply deficits, and the problem of trying to find enough silver or lithium to build all of these structures, especially for the Belt Road Initiative, not even including just like war. That also plays a huge hindrance. It's just, there's a lot going on. Second, with China forecast to have the largest global economy in both 2050 and 2075, recency bias clouds significant headwinds facing the Chinese economy. This is a very long article, but I'll just wrap it up right here. So in summary, the expanded BRICS are economically stronger yet geopolitically weaker. And while they may rebalance the global order, any thoughts of replacing it are misguided. The eclectic mix of different political, economic, and cultural systems, including democracies, autocratic monarchies, authoritarian regimes, and an Islamic theocracy, lay bare the difficulties associated with reaching a common ground on any new system of global governance. By contrast, the West-dominated system they seek to counteract, while not perfect, is far more homogeneous, founded on a well-established rule-based order and without scale of geopolitical tensions that engulf the newly expanded BRICS. That is a very good point. I'm going to bring that paragraph to Andy in our next podcast, because that is a very well-stated point that would bring a lot of conversation and debate, I'm sure. So anyways, yes, I appreciate you for tuning in, especially if you stuck around this long. This is a very important article, so a very important video. And I hope you guys enjoyed it. Make sure you like the video if you did, and make sure you subscribe if you want me to, or if you want to check out my daily videos I post. Thanks for tuning in. This is Silver Slayer. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Peace.